doing this video while fidgeting because it's hard for me to sit still. But I'm doing this because my daughter has an amazing project that she's working on, and she asked me if I would tell my story. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to cuss. If that's a problem, skip it. So I am 43 years old. This isn't the easiest thing in the world to talk about, but I believe that people should be able to share their stories. And I believe that people should have the opportunity to talk and to say the things that they need to say. Because one of the things that abusers do is they take your voice. They take so much, but they take your voice. They don't want to be talked about. They don't want anyone to know. But they do what they do. And then a lot of times victims are afraid to be able to say what the truth is, or it hurts too much, or it brings it all back. Yes, it brings it all back, and that's not fun. But I survived, and I am willing to talk about that, because since August 25th, 2001, I've been free, and I haven't had a hand laid on me. But that is not the way that my life started. Out of respect for the people involved who are innocent, I'm not going to give a lot of details of my childhood. I'm not going to name names. I'm not going to name places. Not to protect the wildly guilty, but because it's irrelevant. When I was very young, I had a wonderful life. And then an individual came into our lives who was extremely violent, who was incredibly manipulative. I was about 6 or 7 when it started. And it just kept getting worse. And it continued until I was 11. I saw someone that I love face down in the snow after I had woken up to a banging, bang, 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 and I saw their head being smashed into cabinets. And then there was a break, and I was holding a cup of hot coffee, and I was going out the door, and then it started up again, and the fucker had this person that I love down in the snow, face first, kicking them in the ribs. And that's the first time I can remember cussing. I threw the cup of hot coffee on his back, and I said, "You let them go, you son of a bitch." And he turned around, and I think I was 8 or 9 at the time. And he turned around and he picked me up by the throat, and he threw me. And I landed about 10 feet away, and I pissed my pants. So that continued for a while. He held a running lawnmower over someone's head. He it was just crazy manipulation. It was a lot of physical abuse. There were times that I apparently was not wanted around at the time, and he would fix a drink. It was about this big. I think it was milk, probably mixed with whiskey. I'm not sure. It was some kind of alcohol, I think. But it would burn. It was awful. And I was made to drink it down in one gulp. I couldn't take a breath. I had to drink it all. Shortly after that, things would get woozy, and I'd go to sleep. And what happened when I was asleep, I don't know. We were camping. We were at a park. And we had just gotten there, we got set up. And I asked if I could go down to the playground. I had not seen of the playground that was immediately by where we were at. It was just a couple, 20, 30 yards away. I hadn't seen that when we had pulled in, but I had seen one about half a mile down the road. So I asked if I could go to the park and play, and I was told that was okay. So I went and I walked down there, and shortly after that, he came to get me, took me back to the campsite, and he proceeded to beat me with a belt, with the buckle end of the belt. And I was crying, and I didn't know why I was being beaten. And I asked, what did I do? And he said, you don't know. No. So I was beaten more. And then I was beaten again until I stopped crying. The place where we lived was a mountainous area, and I was terrified of the heights. And he would purposely drive directly next to the edge, so that as I looked out the window, I didn't see road. I saw nothing but straight down. It was just to terrify me. I had to watch horror movies. I was a very young child. I was probably 7 or 8. And it would scare the living piss out of me. I remember one with swords coming up through the bed. So I was scared to sleep in my bed. I believe it was a St. Valentine's Day massacre. I'm not sure. This was in the 80s. And some psycho was cutting out hearts. And the people would have a Valentine's Day box with a human heart in it. I remember the bodies being put into washing machines or something like that, and they open it up and the body comes tumbling out. I was terrified. I thought that there was some kind of axe killer that was in the hallway that was going to come and cut out my heart. And when I repeatedly said that these were scaring me, I was told that if I did not sit down and watch them, I was going to be tied to the chair and have my eyelids taped open, so I would be forced to watch it. There was an incident that involved a gun. There were many, many times that there was shattered glass, broken furniture, broken objects, etc., etc. Years later, I went back to that house, And I said that I had lived there as a child, and was it okay if I came in and looked at the house? And the people that had bought the house looked at me, and they had the most empathetic look. And they said, "Oh, you're that little girl." Because the neighbors had talked to them about us. And there were so many times that I was told to run to the neighbor's house and not look back because of what was coming next. This continued for years. And it was horrible. And I swore I was never going to live like that again. He is dead now. He was in his mid-50s and just dropped. As far as I know, there was no good reason for why. He just died. And I found the obituaries years later. I had been bored at work, and I got online and I looked them up. I found the obituaries, and what a wonderful man. What a loving family man. Of course, nobody said anything about the monster that he was. If I ever get the opportunity to shit on his grave, I will do it. May he roast in piss. When I was 15, I had my first boyfriend. He was 18, and I had always been the fat kid, the one that nobody wanted around, nobody was ever interested, etc., etc. So he was the first one that showed me any attention. And when we got together, love, two sparrows and a hurricane was the great song of the time. Love, love. And so he told me so many piles of bullshit, and I swallowed every last one of them as if it was gospel truth. And there was a fair in town. Go ahead and pause it. A fair, and he had said something before about Marlboro cigarettes giving him a headache. Whatever. Only Marlboro Reds. Bullshit. I bummed a cigarette off of somebody at the fair, and they happened to give me a Marlboro Red. Big deal. I smoked it. Later, he let me know about how I had hurt him, and he actually replayed the scene. He acted out the scene from Pretty Woman when Julia Roberts told Richard Gere, "You hurt me." He then said, "Well, you know what you have to do." And then at 15, I got pregnant. First time out. Wow, I did not know what to do there. We were both in a production. That put on a play for the town. And he was asleep in the back of the truck, and his scene was coming up. He always wore combat boots. Always wore combat boots. And he had said before, "Don't ever mess with me when I'm asleep because I can't control what I do. And I get violent." Well, I crawled in the back of the truck, and I went to wake him up, to let him know that his scene was coming up and it was, you know, he needed to get up. And he was wide awake and he proceeded to start kicking me in the stomach wearing his combat boots. I'm not going to get into the rest of the relationship with him because it's not relevant. But it was bad. It was very short-lived. I did end up losing my son. He would have been born on Christmas of 95. I saw him the following year at school. He was with an Army recruiter. And I said, "Don't you have a heart or a soul?" And he goes, "Somewhere." Yeah, piece of shit. So I don't really even think about that all that much. It was a long time ago. I was a kid. Shit went south. It was bad. It was more, the hell that I went through was more the reactions of my parents than him, to be honest, because that was bad. I ended up leaving school and I finished my freshman year at my grandparents' kitchen table. I was then put on probation by my parents. When they shipped me off because of him, when they shipped me off and they sent me away to my grandparents' place, it was a nightmare, and it destroyed a lot of really good memories. When I came back, that was the year that I met my husband now. He ended up leaving school and I got self-destructive. He meant so much to me. He ended up leaving school and moving to another state. He didn't know how I felt, and I didn't know how he felt. Boy, would things have been different. So, after he left, I got pretty self-destructive. And I had a terrible relationship with my family. Very, very bad. I was just... It was living hell as a teenager. When I would ask for money to go out, they would yell at me and tell me that I needed to get a job and quit taking money from them. Now, mind you, at this point I'm 17. And so I would go get a job, and then they would yell at me. And then they would tell me that I didn't need to work because they would take care of anything that was needed. And they'd make me quit my jobs. So when I was 17, I got permission to work at this restaurant. And I went to work at this restaurant, and the owner's wife's son would come around. He was 23, I was 17. fell hard and fast. He was separated from his second marriage at 23, and he had already done a couple years in prison. Of course, I'm a very understanding, very forgiving person. I always have been. So that was irrelevant to me. Shortly after I turned 18, I had just come home one night, and I walked right past my stepdad to get into my room. And it wasn't but 15 minutes later, I heard a knock on the door, and it was him. He was there looking for me. And my stepdad told him I wasn't there, so of course I pop out of my room and I'm like, what the hell are you doing? Why are you telling him I'm not here? I don't want you around this asshole. Of course, 18, I'm in love, he's perfect. And I was like, this isn't your call. You need to back off. And he kept pushing me back inside and not letting me get to him. And he turned around, he told him to get off the property and that he was going to call the police. And he said he was going to call the police himself because he was preventing me from leaving. So the police came, and I explained what was going on, and my mom was really sick at the time. And so the police said that since I was 18, he had no right to stop me. And I left with nothing. And the police made sure I got out of my parents' house okay. So we stayed with his mother. The next day I went to school, and because I was 18, I let the school know that I would be taking over my records, that there was to be no communication with my mother. There was to be no communication with anyone but me. I found out how many credits I was shy of graduating, what I needed to do to graduate. And so I took myself out of school and I went to work because I had to work. I only needed one class, and it was going to be at the very end, the last term of school. And it was going to be in the morning. So I took a couple different jobs. I was waiting tables. I worked in a neuro rehab facility. We eventually got our own place. We always had a really hard time holding down a job. And we were not able to make rent most of the time. So the place that we lived at when we were being evicted, it was a terrible place. The fucking walls weren't attached to the floor. It was a shithole. When we were being evicted, he destroyed the house. Like, there was a waterbed in there, and he popped it to just destroy the house, punched holes in the walls, stuff like that. Okay? I think we stayed with his mom again for a little bit. I can't really remember. But I went to work one night at the rehab center. It was a neuro rehab center. And I worked in the pediatric unit. And I dozed off on the couch, and I woke up to this kid. He was 11. He had cosmic strength. And he was just waiting for me to wake up, and he hauled back and just wham. I mean, he just went wailing on my face. And I had a doctor's appointment in the morning because my boobs felt lumpy and I couldn't figure out what was going on. Didn't know what that was all about. And so I went in to see the doctor. And the night before, or the morning after I got my face smashed in, I found out I was pregnant. I was about 6 weeks pregnant. He had not done anything until I got pregnant. We lived in this, that's right, that place. I forgot about that place. We lived in this little bitty shack. It was a bedroom with a very small living room attached to a shitty little kitchen and a tiny concrete shower. It had been converted in part of an old, dilapidated, falling apart house. I forgot about that place. And when I was about 4 months along, we had been talking about the baby, and I said that the baby was always going to come first. And that's when he picked me up and he threw me across the room. We had a hell of a time. He started getting more controlling, more violent. I left him when I was pregnant, moved back in with my mom. But that was just as bad, because it was one version of abuse or another. So I ended up moving back in with him, and we got a duplex. It was a really nice little place. It was cute. He worked for a little bit. What was he doing? I think he got a job as an electrician. He wasn't an electrician. He didn't know what the fuck he was doing. But he faked it well enough, I guess, for a little while. He ended up getting fired from that. But, the whole time I'm pregnant, I'm working, 2 jobs. Back up. I did manage to graduate. I graduated and I walked with my class, and I did it alone. Out of my parents' house. My entire schooling was probably, I'd say I went to about half of the 4 years of high school, the total time that I was there. I didn't go on any senior trips. I didn't go to grad night. I worked. And because my mom was sick during my 10th and 11th grade year, I was kept home to babysit her quite a bit. And then 9th grade I was taken out of school and shipped off halfway through. So I did manage to walk with my class. I graduated on my own. I am proud of myself for that. So I had a cute little house, working, about to have a baby. Went to a secondhand place and bought crib, car seat, swing, a lot of baby stuff. My kid had her own room, very nicely set up. Everything was as cute as I could make it. And I did everything in my power to be the best wife, which I never married him. He was still married the whole time, that I could be. So I went to the hospital to have my kid, and he ended up leaving when I was in labor with her. he went off to go play, get himself something to eat, do whatever the fuck it was he was gonna do. Brought my baby home. And then there was just the constant comments, the remarks, the downgrades, things to say that I was a shitty mother, that I was no good. He did not lift a finger to help with her, and of course I had to work. So even post birth for the first week or so, you don't know what the hell you're doing. You don't know how to do any of this. I was 19 when she was born. I was getting no sleep. I wasn't able to get showers regularly like I wanted to. He kept making remarks about how I didn't look good. I wasn't well put together. I was stinky. Well, yeah, hell yeah, I'm stinky. I'm fucking bleeding. I can't get a shower. I've got booby milk spilling out all over the place. It was disgusting. So while I worked, this was before debit cards became a thing. There wasn't cell phones, you used checkbooks, and you had a bank card, an ATM card. So I had to turn over my bank card to him because he was going to be in charge of paying all the bills. I had to turn over my bank card to him. He would tell me what checks to write. I'd write the checks, mail them off. I'm getting all these letters that, nothing's being paid. Checks are bouncing left, right, and sideways. And I can't figure out why, because there was money in the bank. Well, what he was doing was he would wait until I would get paid, and then he would take all the money out and make me think that the bills were being paid. And he'd spend it on whatever. We ended up getting evicted again. We moved into his mother's trailer, which was a shithole. The toilet hung sideways. There was no plumbing attached to the toilet, so everything was just spilling out onto the ground. The people that lived there had trashed the place. I mean, it was knee and waist deep in filth, and they were shitting in their clothing. There were kids in that place. There was no air conditioning working. It's disgusting. That's where we had to live. At some point in there, shortly after she was born, I had left him again. Went back to my mother's house again. Lasted a week or so. Didn't take. One of his habits would be he would take the money that I would make and he would buy porn. It was on VHS. And I had to buy the porn back from him because I hated it so much. So for $10 per movie, I would buy the porn back and destroy the cassette, destroy the magazine, things like that. He'd just turn around and buy more. It was a game to him. I got a job at a restaurant that was in another town. At this point, he had been fired from his so-called electrical job. So I was working at this restaurant, and my baby had outgrown her car seat, her infant car seat. And he came to the restaurant, and I gave him $80 in tips. And I told him to go buy her a bigger car seat. When he came to pick me up, he had not purchased a car seat. Instead, he had bought workout equipment because I was too fat. I was about all of a size 8 at the time. And with the workout equipment, I was made to work out until I would throw up. While I was working at the restaurant, he was sitting on his ass and he refused to take care of her, so I also had to pay for a babysitter. I got a job at a car dealership, and it was a really good job. I was a manager at the time. I had gotten him a job at the car dealership as a mechanic. A fucking mechanic, give me a break. I'm surprised he knew what a wrench was. So I was waiting tables at night. I was working at the car dealership during the day. He ended up getting fired from the car dealership because he sent 2 brand new trucks off the lot with no oil in them. And of course, it was someone else's fault. Still the money. I have to turn over all the money. The abuse just continues. I would come home and the house would be completely filthy. All the food would be gone out of the house. All of her baby food, formula, stuff like that, just gone. And every dish in the house would be dirty. Pause it. I would ask, why the hell is every dish in the house is dirty? And he would purposely store food in containers so that it would rot. And then he would leave it and he'd say, why don't you let me know how it feels to clean all that up? When I did his laundry, it had to be perfect. It had to be perfectly folded, and he would like to play with oil and grease and things that would stain the clothing. I had to scrub out every stain. I had to be extremely careful, and his entire wardrobe for the week had to be laid out. His underwear, his socks, it had to be laid out in a certain order. The towels had to be folded a certain way. Everything had to be done a certain way. Because my son is recording this, I'm not going to describe the sexual abuse. But suffice it to say that there was a lot for years. I left again. I moved back in with my mother. And this time, they bought me a car. Now, there was about 30 miles difference from where I was living to where I was working at this car dealership. So they bought me a car. It was a 1977 Ford LTD. This thing's a goddamn tank. Gas was about $1.25 at the time. and they rented me a duplex for $450 a month. I also had to pay, I have my story wrong here. I was working at a furniture store at the time. That's where I was working when I'm not sure that I have everything in chronological order. It's been a while. But this is what I'm remembering. I've been thinking about it over the last week or so, trying to get it put together, because things come back in flashes, but not necessarily in chronological order of everything. I forgot. When I had that little duplex, my husband had come back to town. My now husband had come back to town, and he had come looking for me. He couldn't find me. He finally found my mom's house, and he asked her where I was at, and I was either right up the street, like 3 streets up and 2 streets down, or I was down at he's silly butt, or I was down at the duplex that I had, depending on when the timing was. She said she doesn't live here anymore, and she slammed the door in his face. I was getting my head put through walls at the time. How different would things have been? So they rented me this duplex. They paid first, last, and the deposit. They bought me that car. Electric was about $100 a month. I forget what all it was, but the total expenses were about $1,800 a month for between the gas and food and paying for my place and everything, and the babysitter. And I was making $400 a week when I was working at this furniture store. And the way it worked was they would pay you $400 a week, and then your sales were expected to top out the $400 for the 4th week, and anything over that is commission. Well, I'm a shitty salesperson, so that didn't fly. So I was actually making, you're supposed to be making $1,200 a month, and then if you didn't make enough to hit your sales for the 4th week of $400, you didn't get the money. So I was actually only making was it $4 or was it $250? I was supposed to be getting $1,200 a month, so it was $300 a week, I guess. So yeah, it was $300 a week, so I ended up making $900 a month. So I'm literally at half of my expenses. So there's no way that I can maintain this. That tank of a car was just burning gas like crazy. I had left him. For some dumb reason, I let him talk and come back into my life. He showed up at where I was working one day, and he said that he had already, because he had taken my keys, he had given me an excuse for why he needed the keys, and I was stupid enough to give it to him. And he had taken my keys, and he came to where I was working, and he said that the keys had been turned into the landlord, all the furniture had been moved out, and that I was going home, and I had no other choice. I bought a car from the car dealership that I was working at, and when I was back at the trailer, he took the keys to that, took it out for a spin. He had this friend that he was with, and he would constantly be taking my car. And at this point, I'm done. I just don't know how to get out of it. I had bought a living room set. So I had, it was black leather, love seat and couch, and the tables were glass and wrought iron, and they were round. So my little girl was 2 at the time. We were not allowed to eat at the kitchen table. And a 2-year-old who has a Happy Meal, chicken nuggets and fries, and how many times did I have to go back to my mother and beg for $100 so I could go buy a 30-cent can of peas and be able to stock my house up with food when it just randomly disappeared. That happened all the time. So he's taking my money. He took my place away from me. I had traded my tank in for the car that I bought, so he was taking my car away from me. It was a much newer car. The forcing me to work, the constant belittling, the name calling. One of the things that he would do was he would take my baby and he would raise up her middle finger and teach her and say, let's learn to say fuck you, mommy. Fuck you, mommy. My first Mother's Day was absolute joy. I was told to get my ass out of bed and get his breakfast made and his day ready to go. I was not supposed to have contact with my friends. I was not supposed to have contact with my family. I was not to go anywhere without him. I was to be accountable for every place that I went, everything that I did. Now, the whole time, pause. I forgot what the last thing I said was. I got interrupted, had to pause. But the constant belittling, I mentioned Mother's Day. This kind of shit just went on and on and on. 4 years. 4 years of this. He would get mad and he would punch holes in the walls. I was grabbed by the hair and dragged down the hallway and thrown into the bedroom, and I had to kick the door shut so that my child would not see what happened next. I would wake up to being smothered with a pillow. He would take my fingers and push them down like that to see how far it could go before I would cry. He put cigarettes out on me. Right there, that tattoo my daughter put on me, and that covers up a burn of oops, sorry. Was it complete financial control, sex abuse, food abuse. He would take the keys away. He would lock me out of the house. He would disappear for hours and hours on end, and I didn't know where he was at. At one point, his wife came back into town, and he said that he had always said how much he hated her. Time for me to get out, because he wanted her. It was ugly. The trailer that we lived in was 3 trailers up and right there. So we were here and the other one was here. That other trailer had been where my boyfriend from high school, my first boyfriend from high school, where his parents lived, and he was over there all the time, and he knew what had happened with him. And he knew how much it scared me. So he would purposely go over and chit-chat. He would throw it in my face. And then one day I was standing at the door of the trailer and I yelled at him. When he started to come up the stairs, and I was like, what the fuck are you doing over there? You know how this makes me feel and everything. And I forget what he said, but he made some kind of remark about how he did it to scare me, is pretty much what it was. And I hauled off and I punched the motherfucker across the face. Man, I landed that blow like you wouldn't believe. Bam! Right in the jaw. And then my back broke the walls of the house. we were back to not being able to eat at the table. So my child was 2, and she was not allowed to sit down. She had to stand up in order to eat. And she dropped a French fry on the floor. Big fucking deal. It's a kid. Kids drop food all the time. He went ballistic, and he went like that and just knocked her head right into this glass and iron coffee table. And that was when I snapped. That was my absolute fucking done point. And I flew at him. Never found the earring that I had been wearing, which was ripped out of my ear when my head was buried in the couch, and I was getting the shit kicked out of me. He never slapped me in the face. He never punched me in the face. It did not dawn on me what was really happening. I knew I didn't want to be with him, but I wasn't putting together what was going on until I started working at a bookstore in the mall. And I happened to pick up a book about domestic violence, and it started to dawn on me. Holy shit. All this stuff is happening. My father, I did not know. I had met him when I was 18. He had flown me and this prick out to where he lived to meet him. So at this point, I'm 21. And my grandmother had cancer, and she was dying. I made arrangements with my father that I had to get out. And I was going to move to where he was at, to the city he was at, and live with them. So we made these arrangements on how I could leave. And I wasn't sure that I was even going to be able to get on the plane. And so I had told him that I was going to go out there and I was going to spend some time with my grandmother before she died. That would work. I got on the plane August 25th, 2001. And that was the last time I saw him. I had to pack convincingly. I took all of the mementos for my kid. I took her birth certificate. I took her, her baby book, stuff like that. I had 37 cents in my wallet. He didn't know it, but I had taken all of the bills because he had run up so much debt in my name. I have never had good credit. From the day I turned 18, he started taking out credit cards and things under my name and charging things up under my name, and I didn't even know it. He ran up 10 grand in debt. I took all of that with me. I left behind my high school diploma. I left behind my yearbooks. I had left behind most of my clothes. I had 6 suitcases, 37 cents in my wallet, and 10,000 in debt. And I was flying from a teeny tiny little town on the East Coast to Phoenix, to this huge city that had 6 million people in it at the time. Scared to death, not even knowing if my father was actually going to be at the airport when I landed. He was, but he was late. But I got out. I had a return ticket that I was not sure if I was going to use or not for September 13th, 2001. And September 11th happened. He wanted me on that fucking plane. But I knew if I got on the plane, he was going to kill me. So I told him, basically, you're crazy. I'm not getting on a goddamn plane right now. Why the fuck would I get on a plane 2 days after all these planes had been hijacked and flown into things? And it just, the world went crazy. It's strange to say, but the truth is September 11th saved my life. Because from there I was able to start making excuses. My car was back where we lived. And I told him that I was going to stay in Phoenix and I was going to get a job. And I was going to set up a life for us. And all he had to do then was come out and have a fresh start, and he'd had everything nice and set up and ready for him. But in order to do this, I needed my car. And he was willing to send my car if I was willing to send him money to fix his truck. So my grandfather had made arrangements for my car to be on a transport. It was driven across the country. You need a bath. It was driven across the country. I had told him that the only way that the shipper would pick up the car was from a car dealership, which was a dealership that I had worked at. I had a friend there, and he was willing to drop the car off, and my friend knew what was going on, and he called me up when he got my car, and he said he had dropped it off, but that he had told him not to tell me, but he was moving to Michigan, and he had a woman in the car with him. He called later that day, and he said, we need to talk. I said, yeah, I think we do. This was my snap. I was done when he put his hand on my kid. But I was still scared and couldn't figure out how to get out of it. And this was my snap. And it was at this point that it was over. Let me back up just a second. Because after he attacked me when he hurt my kid, I turned around and I had told him, what are you going to do? Are you going to kill me? You're not going to have my child, and you're going to end up rotting in prison. Because he had always told me before, don't ever call the police on him. It said, are you going to beat me? I'll heal. Are you going to do this? This is what's going to come of it. I said, but you will never lay a fucking hand on my kid, or I will end you. And he never physically came at me again after that, because the chicken shit son of a bitch recognized I was done, and something changed. But when he called me when I was in Phoenix and he said we needed to talk, I said, so I hear you're going to Michigan. He said, I'm already here. He said, straw just broke the camel's back, buddy. Because I don't want to get my ass in hot water, I'm not going to repeat the entirety of the following conversation. But suffice it to say, my grandfather broke down in laughter. He was listening to the whole thing on speakerphone at the time, and it was funny as fuck, but I took back my power. He started saying how much he wanted his family and this and that, and he wanted this and he wanted that. And then he said he threatened suicide. Typical. So typical of abusers. He threatened suicide. He said that if he couldn't have us, he would just kill himself. And then there would be one less asshole in the world. and he would, at least I would get the life insurance. I said, for one thing, you stupid son of a bitch, you have to actually pay for a life insurance policy in order for it to be effective. For another thing, it has a 2-year suicide clause on it, so that's not going to work. But if you think you're significant enough in this world that you're going to make a difference in any kind of population, that's the part I'm not going to repeat. Use your imagination. Fucking done. Done. When I got my car, I found dried shit-covered socks in the back seat and stains. He had this buddy of his that had gone from a mental institution into prison. And I believe that when the piece of shit was in prison before, that someone had gotten to him and he liked it. And he had been fucking this friend of his, this guy friend of his, who was also an IV drug user. Bet your ass I went and got tested. But I had my car, I had my kid. My child would start saying things like, I scared, I hide, he mean. But he said that he wanted to have contact with her. And I said, okay, you're going to pay child support. You are going to call her at X time. I will be on the other end of the phone. I will disconnect if there is any issues, anything that I don't agree with. You will call at this time, and if you are late by 3 minutes, you will not speak to her, etc., etc. He called one time. She flipped her shit after that. She shut down. And hang on. I've got a little one out here that I don't want to hear this. Pause. This is not something that I want him to hear. Anyway, he called one time. He spoke with her once, and she lost it. She went into a total fucking meltdown. Called again. He was late. I said, you're not talking to her. Never heard from him again. I never went after him for child support. I never tried to initiate contact. I wanted to have absolutely nothing to do with him. It was safer that way. About a year after the fact, I got a call from the Michigan State Police and said, did I know him? Well, yes, I do. Well, we need information on his past. Well, apparently what the dumb fuck had done was he had gotten himself a job at a mechanic shop, and there was an engine in a car that he decided he wanted. So he broke into the shop after hours while the vehicle was up on a lift, and he tried to steal the engine out of it. He fucked up, and he managed to get pinned under the engine on the concrete floor in Michigan in the middle of winter with a shattered pelvis. That's divine justice. When the police called me, I said, oh, please do let me know how I can help you. I don't know whatever came of it after that. I didn't call and find out. I didn't care. I just wanted him out of my life. Still, he had never gotten a divorce, so thank fuck I never legally married him. But I still didn't fully comprehend what I had been through. And I started taking or going to a support group for people who have been in domestic violence situations. And there was this wheel, the wheel of control, power and control, whatever. And I took a highlighter and I started highlighting in these different pie pieces that were in it. You know, there was a financial piece, there was a sexual piece, there was an isolation piece, etc., etc. And inside all of these pie slices, they had different behaviors that were common. So I started highlighting it. And when I was done, I looked at this pie chart and I was, that's when it hit me. That's when I realized that everything that had happened to me was an incredible amount of abuse for 4 very terrible years. And I never put it together because he didn't slap me or punch me in the face. The bruises that I had weren't visible. The damage that was inflicted wasn't visible. But I did not realize that there was help available. I did not realize that I had another alternative. I was under the impression that this is what men are. And better the devil you know than the devil you don't know. Because it was at least this way. We were living in his mother's trailer. Weren't going to get evicted. I had a roof over my kid's head. I did not comprehend how bad it was. I did not comprehend what was happening. But when I saw him go at my child, that was my done. Back in 2001, between 1997 and 2001, the internet was not a thing. There were not resources. I lived in a small country town. He was a name. He wasn't a name. His family name was a name. He was a black sheep piece of shit. I did not realize that there were options. I had grown up hearing about welfare trash and how the government would take pretty children away and give them away to other families. I didn't know that there was help to be had. I was alone. I was fucking alone. And again, not relevant, but the life that I went through after getting out of that was another set of living hell. But it was not at the hands of a man. It was because of circumstances. And it took me a really long time. It does not help a woman or a man who is trapped in violence to tell them just leave. It does not help them to ask them questions about why don't they go. It does not help to argue with them when they defend their abuser. Giving them all the points where they're wrong and they are allowing it, so to speak, you're not going to help them. They don't need your criticism. They don't need you pointing out to them why their life is wrong. It took me 4 times to leave him, and I am on the lower end of the spectrum of how many times somebody actually gets out. It takes to actually get out, if you ever get out. If there's something that you want to do for someone, you can let them know that there are resources available. You can help them find those resources. You can tuck $100 bill somewhere and let them know that it's there. You can be on their side. You can be there for them when they come to the point that they're ready to go, when they hit their done. You can help with their children. You can help with their bills. People stay because they're trapped, because they don't realize that there is a way to still have a roof over your head, still feed your children, still keep your children, especially when they have been so brainwashed into saying, you're nothing. You can't make it without me. You aren't smart enough. You're not good enough. You don't look good enough. You're not a good enough parent. They threaten to take the children. They threaten all kinds of things in all kinds of ways to convince you that you have to have them in order to be okay. And that's bullshit. And it might put you out for a while. You might need to be able to get in the car and go pick someone up at 3 o'clock in the morning. You might need to sit there and shut the fuck up while they cry. You might need to take care of those kids for a while. But if you love somebody, you can be there and you can help them find, stay back for a minute. You can help them find the resources. You can be understanding. Don't judge them. Don't criticize them. Don't give them all the reasons why they need to be somewhere else. They already know it. Deep in their gut, they already know it. They don't know how. I will tell my story 1,000 times over until the day I die, if it's going to help somebody get out and stay out and save their life. And unfortunately is not strong enough a word. But it happens every single fucking day. It happens in religions. It happens in non-religions. It happens in places with money, and it happens in places that are dead fucking broke. It happens to people with children, and it happens to people with no children. It happens if you're gay, if you're straight, if you're bi, whatever. It doesn't matter. This is a disease. Hold on. This is a disease. And these sick fuckers are everywhere. The best you can do, educate yourself, recognize the signs, know what it is that you or someone you love is going through. Be able to spot what you're seeing for yourself. And know that you have a way out. There are ways out that you can safely leave. There are things you can do to help somebody safely leave. Educate yourself. And if you can somehow get it into you, you are better than this. You don't deserve this. You are worthy of this. You are worthy of being alive. You are worthy of being well. It's been over 20 years and I still have nightmares. I had one a couple weeks ago. I wake up screaming sometimes. There are claw marks behind my bed on the wall from nightmares. It takes time to heal, and you need to have grace for yourself to be able to heal. You need to have grace for the people you love while they're trying to heal and understand. Educate yourself on what's available. Educate yourself on what the signs are. Get the fuck out and then fucking live.